Hello there, this video is about printing your own prints and what you need in a darkroom to do it. And then also some more advanced techniques or things that I've learned along the way. This video is for beginners and more advanced learners, but I mean, you can take what you need from it, and then if something sounds too complicated, just ignore it for now. But I hope it helps you anyway. Okay, so the first thing you need in your darkroom is an enlarger, which is the main part of the equipment, and a dark curtain or a blackout curtain. So the room that I'm in now is actually light proof. Also, what you might have noticed is there's no water supply. So people think that you have to develop stuff in your bathroom or you need a running water source, but I don't feel that you do need that. And I think, in fact, it's better if the room that you're in, that you're doing the printing, you can be comfortable. So after your enlarger, obviously you need clean sheets, like a wet sheet, and also your 3 trays and a big tray for a wash. You can change these pants. There we go. So nice, unfashionable but comfortable pants there. And also, don't forget to bring music and tea or beer or whatever you like to drink, because you're going to be in here a long time, so be as comfortable as you can. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the actual enlarger. Enlargers come in different sizes, can raise up and down, and that will change the size of your print. You might have to buy one of these, but this is a timer, so I'll try and put a better picture up. But basically, you set the time with this, and you can set your exposure times. So for example, if I turn it on, it's also rigged up with the red light, so you can set that to any time you want, and that's something that you really need unless you want to look at a clock and keep all the times in your head. They also come with trays. So it comes with a 35mm tray, as you can see. So that's the size of 35mm. So I also have this one, which is actually cropped out. You can see it. So it's actually 6x7. But I crop it out for 6x6 stuff. Another thing that people do is this one in particular. I don't know if you can see it. If you can't, I'll put a better picture up. But it's actually filed out. The edges are filed to give like rough edges if people do full frame prints. You might ask, like, why have different lenses? This one's for 35mm film, so it's made to be used with a 35mm negative. Here's another one, just looks like the same thing basically, but this is a 90mm, which is used for medium format, and basically all it does is it more just like a lens on a camera. So for example, you can see the 6x6 as a big negative, so if we put that in with a 35mm lens, it might, if we enlarge it, it might like bleed off the actual enlarger. So, but don't worry, you can still print, like, depending on how big you go. Okay, next thing, very, very important, that people who start might not think it's that important, but this is a set of contrast filters. These go in here in like a little tray, goes under the lens, and what they do is they they changed the contrast. Yeah, judging by the name, they changed the contrast of the image. So usually, I know I did, but when I first started printing stuff, I must have printed like 20 of the same image, because it kept coming out grey. Everything was grey, and I was like, why can I not get these like black and white pictures that I see everywhere that people print? And it's because of contrast filters. Something else which is important is a focus finder. So basically this is used for focusing. So when you put your negative in the tray and you set it to project, you can check the focus with this thing. So that's the sort of intro to the Enlarger. I hope that helps. Okay, so this is the more advanced part of the Enlarger section. So I talked about first the trays and contrast filters and the focus finder and the timer. Obviously, I didn't mention before, but you need to use the red light for when you develop stuff, because black and white paper is not sensitive to this red light. So that's why we can use the red light when we develop stuff. The more advanced stuff is this Enlarger in particular, but other Enlargers too have something similar. They have another tray at the top, and this has like anti-heat glass inside. But if you're gonna do color stuff, like color prints, you can buy filters and put them in or cut them out to fit in this tray, and then you can also print color prints with a black and white Enlarger. I use these Bessler filters. Colour work is difficult, like people say, at first, but then it's quite easy to do. I'll just show you an example. So this is just a red filter, and so you can mix them. So I'd like have a red and yellow, depending on the image that I was printing, and then simply put that in the top, fit snugly, and then put that back in. But I wouldn't be using a contrast filter as well. Also, if you do have a color head, like not a black and white Enlarger, but a color Enlarger, you don't need these contrast filters, because you can use just the red dial on your Enlarger, and that will be the equivalent to using red filters. Another thing about heads is, this model doesn't do it, but there are some Enlargers you can buy that actually have like you can loosen them and turn the actual head to face right or face left and project your Enlarger onto a wall or a very big surface. That way you can make extra large prints and stuff like that. There's also some Enlargers that you can take the head off, turn it round and put it on the column, and that way you can project onto the floor and make bigger prints like that. And last thing I'll cover, this timer in particular comes with a light meter. I'm not sure if you're familiar with light meters, but even say a photographer's light meter is very similar to this one. It just has a sensor, a light sensor on it. And what happens is all light meters look for grey, like their perfect exposure is middle grey. So basically, if you can imagine using a negative or taking a photo on a digital camera, the aim of the camera can't think for you, the camera can't be creative for you. The camera is thinking in terms of how to get the most information onto the sensor, or how to get the most light, the most information onto a negative. and that's why it uses, it looks for 18% grey. Don't worry about that if you're confused. Basically, take the light meter, project your image, and put this on somewhere that should be like middle grey, a face or something like that. But then again, I won't get into it. But anyway, it's a good way to get a ballpark sort of exposure time for your negatives, because you don't know if it's going to be 30 seconds or if it's going to be 2 minutes yet, depending on how high your enlarger is and what paper you're using and all sorts. And it also has a sensitivity dial on the timer, which means if you do use different papers, you can change the sensitivity to that. Okay, so I hope that wasn't too complicated. I hope it helped you out. So that's the advanced part of the enlarger. Okay, so this next part is about enlarger accessories. So first thing that I'd recommend is getting an easel. Now easels come in many sizes. This one in particular is quite big. I don't know if you can see because of the exposure, but I actually have markings on here. So I got what, 10 by 8, 8 by 8. So I just draw them on with pencil. So then if I want to change this, like I can move them up and stuff like that, and I don't have to waste paper trying to get the borders right. So again, some easels like have 4 of these sort of blades, so then you can really like have control over your border size and stuff like that. But I don't mind this one. I tend to make notes on them too with pencil, like stuff that you're always gonna like need to reference. So for example, I got my contact sheet, basic exposure time, and also how high it should be. I also have just a brief color explanation that tells me what color filters I should put in here if I want to just start printing color. Like that's a good place to start, sort of thing. So any notes that you're going to use a lot, like I tend to write on there. Yeah, so blowers, like just use them to blow stuff. So say you've got your tray, once you put your negative in your tray, blow it, check it in the light that there's no dust, and then good to go. You might not think, you might think, oh, I could just blow like on my negative, but you'd be surprised how many times you do that and then like you spit on it by accident, like just a little bit, and then you smudge it on the neg. And, you know, it's a lot easier. Dodging tools, so I went over this in a different video too, but these are just used to dodge your negative. So what have I got here? I got like different shapes. Just make them out of like tape and wire, you know. But you have all different sizes, but you'd be surprised like how useful these things are too. To just say the face is too dark, you dodge the face like maybe one stop or something like that. It's good to have like pieces of cardboard for dodging again, dodge skies or making your what do you call it? Your test strip with your different exposures like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. Burners. So burning stuff, I don't know if you can see that. So it's just a hole in a piece of card, right? So you hold it up and you can burn extra areas you want. It's really, really useful. I use Dev Times, I think it's called, or Massive Dev Chart. I try and put a link up to it, but you can make like all custom sort of development times. Also change to red light mode, so you can use this in the darkroom, and then like it'll start, you press start, put it in the developer, This one, you probably can't read it, but development 3 minutes, stop bath 10 seconds, fixing 1 minute, and then hypoclip. Don't worry about that. But it's very, very useful tool. Okay, so now let's talk about the actual chemicals and what they do. So you can see that I've labeled mine 1, 2, 3. That's, I don't know, that's just habit, like keeping everything logical and stuff like that. First one is the developer, right? So that makes your image, develops the image on the actual paper. The next one is stop, and it does exactly what its name entails. So you don't actually need to use a stop bath, you can just have 2. But what stop bath does is it stops the chemical process of the development and like neutralizes the print. Its main purpose is to preserve the life of the fixer. So because we put it in the stop, the fixer can last quite a long time, depending on how many prints you do. So let's talk about the actual chemicals. Like, there are many different chemicals on the market. I like to use Ilford. First chemical is I use Ilford multigrade developer. Like, people think like stuff like this is complicated to like mix other chemicals. But it looks that way when you look at it, but really it isn't. It says 1 to 9 on it, so that's 9 parts water and 1 part developer. So I like to use, these are 10 by 8 trays. I like to use 1 litre in each tray. So then I got 900 mils of water and then 100 mils of developer. After that, Ilfo stop. Again, this is 1 to 19. So if you use a litre, then you're going to be using what, like 50 mils of this each time. Ilford rapid fixer. So again, people tend to stick to what they know, so I kind of started on these. The last tray, which you can see over here, is just water. It's here because I don't have a water source in this room. I don't have a source of water, so like people always talk about dark rooms and having sinks or doing a dark room in your bathroom, but I don't think it's that much of a good idea. We've got the sheet here, which is like a bicycle sheet, like a rain cover. So you can get car covers and all sorts like that. So I like to use these just in case I get any spills, and then I can wipe them down. But this is more or less like all you need chemical wise. Developer, a stop, fix, and rinse. And then that's it. So next I'll just show you, like I told you what they do, but now I'll actually show you. It'll be a little different because obviously it's going to be light, so the paper is probably just going to turn all black, but just to show you like the actual process of like how I work and how sort of fast it is and the flow of everything. Okay, so that'll be next. This will be under the red light. So now I'm going to do this, but it's going to ruin my paper and it's just going to turn all black and there won't be an image. But just to show you the workflow and like how simple it can be. So at this stage, I'd have made a test strip so I know my exposure. So I'm going to say that on my test strip, let's say I did 4 sets of 5. So 4 times 5 is 20, right? But I know in my head that I want to expose my paper for 20 seconds, right? Okay, so now it's red light, there's no light on. I got my negative in. A little note would be, with your test strip, like some people make test strips for exposure and then for the contrast, but I don't. I just make a test strip with the contrast filter already in, just because like I'm kind of comfortable with it all, but don't worry about that. So red light's on, exposure 20 seconds. So I would open my box under the red light, take my paper out, make sure my paper's closed straight away. A little tip, this one in particular goes all the way up to the top, so I know that it's going to stay, my borders are going to be right because I push it up and then to the left. Also, you can tell what side your paper is by the texture. If you can't yet, you can wet your finger a little bit, and it's not advised, but the sticky part is the part with the emulsion on, the part that needs to face up. So I put that down, and then these are 5 seconds, so 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's 10 seconds now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 15 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then that's my 20 seconds, right? So after that, I pull this up, still on the red light. And then, like, I'd kind of scoop it in. Okay, so just scoop it in nicely, and you can touch it down if it's not sinking, and then very gently just rock it, and you'll see the image coming up already. And as expected, like, it's turning black because of the light in the room. This is resin coated paper, so I think it takes about a minute and a half. So for the full minute. And another note, which is good, is if it looks right under the red light, if it looks as if it's good and you've got it just right, then it probably isn't. Usually under red light it looks darker, like the image looks darker, and then once the light comes on afterwards, it's usually about right. So that's another good tip. Then you can take this up by the corner and let it rinse just before, like, the development time runs out. And of course it'd be going with this, but just to show you. Next is the stop bath, so put it in nicely, rock it. I usually give about 10-15 seconds in this one. 10-15, whatever. Then again, take it from the corner very nicely. And notice how I'm using different tongs, because if I use the same ones, it's going to mark the actual paper. Put that in there. Then my fix is going. Start my fix timer. And you know, I usually give this a minute in the fix, but some people give it like 3 minutes, but it's kind of up to you. All the guidelines on the actual chemicals and on the paper and everything like that, they seem so strict, but in reality, like you can get away with so much more. Black and white chemistry is 20 degrees. Thermometer, I can check how the temperature of my chemicals, but it's good also to have a digital one. And then I put on my desk lamp, which I failed to mention before, but it's good to have like a lamp that you can just switch on and off instead of walking up and turning on the main light. So I check it, I let this rinse, and then I put it in the wash. So usually when I put it in the wash, I put it face down like this, right? And then that's more or less it. Because like it floats up to the top, and if you leave it on the other side, it floats up and like it can dry, and you know, you don't want like half your print drying before the rest of it. So I look at it in the wash and check it. If it's okay, be like, oh, that's nice. Another good tip is to go and look at it under good light, under daylight. because being in a dark room, your eyes are adjusting to the light in here, so it's good to check that. You can see like it worked, right? And then, I mean, if you knew that was 20 seconds now and that was okay, you could make like 100 of that same print the same way. I hope that helps. A few more things to add on. I live in quite a, gets hot in the summer and cold in the winter. So it's just in the spring now, but in the winter especially, I use like cardboard underneath these 3 trays to keep the temperature at 20 degrees. And if that's not enough, I also use an oil heater. So this is just like a pretty cheap oil heater, and you can regulate the temperature on the side. And what I do is I would plug that in, and I hope you can see this, but I put my chemicals, especially my developer, closer to it, and it kind of heats the tray. So I keep it regulated that way. There are actually chemical heaters that you can buy that go underneath the trays, but I mean, I don't have one of those, so. But again, if you develop at 18 degrees and you develop at 24 degrees, you're still going to get an image. It's just going to change the contrast a little bit, but I wouldn't worry too much. Another thing is, if you do color work, you only have 2 chemicals these days. You have a color developer and then something called Blix. Blix is bleach and fix, Blix. And basically it's mixed into one. For color chemistry, you need to develop at around 30 degrees. So it's a little bit more difficult, but it's okay. So this will be filled with hot water, and I leave my trays like kind of floating in it. Again on the cardboard to keep it insulated. And then I would have these 2 heaters. Now these are basically fish tank heaters, like for tropical fish. Usually this one goes up to 44 degrees, this one goes up to 32. So it's quite a big bit of water, and if you're in a cold room, it's not going to help. But I put one in there for the dev, and one for the fix and blitz or whatever. And those will be plugged in, and basically I do the same thing, but with color chemistry you can't use a red light, so it's in pitch black, can't see a thing. But again, like if you've been doing this and you're into the routine, it's not that difficult. Take a piece of paper out, you can't see it using your hands, put it to the left and to the top, expose it, put it in the developer, like you're using your hands all that time, put it in the developer, have that. The hardest part is taking the color out of this one and into the Blix. And once that's done, once it's done in the Blix, you can turn the light on and take it out the fixer and put it in the rinse with the light on. You might not want to use the timer either, it's got to be pitch black. So I did a voice recording and just recorded like 30 seconds, 1 minute, 1 minute 30. So I could just listen to it and then put my stuff in that way. So that is color development. For color chemicals, I use by Naniwa. Now, this is Asia, so they have Naniwa. They don't even have this now actually, I think they sold out. But I think the best one to use is an English brand called Tetanol. But anyway, you have to mix these chemicals at like 38 degrees, you do the mixing, and then you develop at 30 degrees, I think. Is it worth doing your own colour stuff? yes and no. Like if colour's all you do, it's definitely worth it. But what I find is I do a lot more black and white. So like doing colour stuff, it can be sometimes a little bit of waste of money. Like if I'm not going to do a lot of developing, that is. But these kits, and especially the Tetano kits, come in 1 litre batches like this, or 5 litre batches. It's definitely worth it if you like doing your own colour stuff, because you have full control of what it's going to look like, what colour you want, what tint. Because the people, like if you've done colour stuff before and you've gone to somewhere and got it developed at like Boots or something like that, and your prints come back and they don't look that good, most likely it's because they haven't been printed that good, or the person just doesn't really care when he's printing them, because it's kind of like white balance on Camera Raw on Photoshop. Like the person will probably find the balance that fits most of the pictures and then just print a whole batch. So you know, films, like you got tungsten and daylight, right, and then flash. Even if you take tungsten film and shoot in the day so it goes blue, right, in print you can correct it back. It's not ideal, but you can correct it back a lot more than you'd see if you got it developed somewhere else. And yeah, it's quite fun, especially if you like cross-process stuff, or like kind of weird looks to your colour stuff. I try and put some images up while I'm talking about this, but yeah, colour stuff, it's worth a try. The first time you do colour stuff, you're gonna hate it. But once you get the right, once you get one good print in colour and you know what filters you're using, and you can use that as like a starting point, the rest of it's so much easier. Like say you get an outside photograph and you get the exposure right, you can use that starting point for any other shot that you shot outside, and like it's going to be like 90% good basically. But getting that first one is difficult. It took me about 2 or 3 hours to get it, but then after that it's just the same as black and white. Get a print every 15-20 minutes. The next thing to talk about is paper. So there are many different types of paper you can buy. Black and white. For black and white, I've always printed with Ilford. I started on RC paper. So the print that we saw before, the black one, this one that was pretty easy to do, right? Pretty fast. That is RC paper. RC stands for resin coated. People are most familiar with resin coated prints. It's basically a layer of plastic that's over over your paper, like a layer of plastic on the front of the paper. And what that does is it makes it last for a long time, and it protects it from scratching easily. So that's the difference from the next paper, which is FB, which stands for fibre paper. First thing you'll notice is the paper is kind of thicker, it feels thicker, and it's kind of curlier too, like you look at that. Doesn't come out like kind of flat like the RC does. The main difference is it's got a little more contrast in the blacks and in the whites. Like when it's actually developed and dried and you put them side by side, you'll see like the whites punch a lot more. But whether that's worth it or not is kind of up to you. If you're just beginning, I definitely recommend you use RC paper, because you're going to go through a lot of papers and make a lot of mistakes. And FB is twice, if not more, the price. Pretend that it's going to go for 20 seconds. So now it's 10, 15, and 20. Now, one of the main differences when you develop, the image doesn't come up as fast. So with the RC paper, it comes up within about 10 seconds, whereas with fibre it takes about a minute to come up. As you can see, it takes a while for the chemicals to soak into the paper, so I gotta help push the sides down a little bit more. And once it soaks the chemicals in, it starts coming up. Like you see it come in. But yeah, it's I think most professionals use FB paper, and then they frame them and everything like that. But there are people that use RC paper that are pros, but it's just seen as the main medium. I guess you might compare it to painting or something like that. So some people might say oil painting is where it's at, but they might have started with acrylic paints. Kind of similar. So again, RC paper takes about a minute 30 seconds to fully develop. This stuff takes you're supposed to leave it in for 3 minutes, so it soaks in. But I'm not going to do that anyway, I'm just going to take it out. But again, it's easier to damage too, because there is no plastic on the front of it. It's just the emulsion, so you're seeing the emulsion uncovered basically. That's probably why it's a little bit more contrasty. Another thing about this paper is the drying is a lot slower. Some people buy dryers and presses and stuff like that. They put the paper in, but for me, yeah, I'll show you later. But just hang it up on pegs basically, and then what I do is once it's dried on the pegs, it gets very curly, curls up. So I put it in a book, like a magazine, and then I put my laptop on the magazine. And I think a lot of people, their laptops overheat, they get too hot, right? But the heat helps almost iron it flat. So I'll try and put an image in of that too. But it's definitely the way to go, I think. Presses and stuff like that, damage it, and I don't know. It sounds too, how do you say in English? It sounds too troublesome to go through all that process just to get a nice print. And again, the fixing, I'll leave it in the fixers longer, but I'm not. Just gonna take it out. And but man, I've seen people print on RC paper, and I couldn't tell if it was fibre or RC really. If the print's good enough, you're not looking at what paper it was printed on, you're looking at the picture. Which is another thing I should say about this video, is it's mainly technical stuff. I'm just trying to share my knowledge. Let's see if I hold these up. You probably can't even tell the difference yet until they dry. I think it's when they dry you can tell. But yeah, they look exactly the same. Okay, so you got papers. I use Ilford. There are many different types of paper in terms of texture. I use glossy. Glossy is kind of shiny on top. It gets the most contrast, I feel. The blacks are the blackest and the whites are the whitest in glossy. After that you've got matte, which is a paper sort of feel, it's printed on paper. And it's kind of, again, it's matte, right? The blacks are kind of, they're not quite punchy, but maybe you're going for that. After that you've got like satin, which is kind of a mix between. It's not glossy, but it's not matte. It's kind of, again, in the middle. It's kind of got a little bit of sheen, but again, it's middle ground. And after that, you've got what? You've got pearl. Pearl is kind of a lot like satin, but the whites are quite punchy. But I would recommend using glossy because it's nice and punchy. To start on, at least. Another thing is this paper is called multigrade. So all these papers are multigrade, and what that means is you can use them with contrast filters. So a long time ago they didn't have multigrade paper, and you would have to have grade 1 paper, grade 2 paper, grade 3, and you wouldn't have contrast filters. Like, the contrast will be in the actual paper. These days we have multigrade, so it's more cost effective, and basically we use the paper with the filters to create what contrast we want. Yeah, so both RC and FB papers come in this. There are also other papers like warm tone, which are kind of gold tone and stuff like that, but I mean, I think most people use either glossy or matte or something like that, and then stick with it. But hope that helps. Burning and dodging tools, very useful. But other than that, there are things that you can do that it took me a long time to find out about them. Raising the easel. So say you've got like a girl and she's quite short and you want to lengthen her legs, you can do that by raising this or raising the top half, and then it kind of stretches the image. I mean, not too much, but you'd be surprised how little you can tell, like when you do it here, like, and you place something underneath. It's a bit harder to print, but it works. Another thing people use that for is kind of perspective. So say you're using like I don't know, you shoot from a low angle or high angle, and you've got like a bit of distortion going on with your lines. You can use that to sort of straighten your lines up, or even try and fit some more stuff into the frame. But I've used that before, and it works. Other than that, stuff that I've not used but I've heard of, some people put like use like hot water to like use hot water to like bring out detail in certain parts. So say you've got a sky and it's like really cloudy and you want it to be like, you want a lot of detail in the sky or something, and maybe like I'd just burn it, you know, I just burn it with this thing. But you can also use like hot water, like dip it in hot water and like put the hot water on prior to putting it into the developer, and then the developer reacts faster around that area. And that brings me to the next point, is when you do print stuff in the developer, I talked about temperatures before, but what temperature does is alters the contrast. So like I said, black and white is supposed to be at 20 degrees, right? That's like the standard. If you go lower than that, like 17 degrees, then your print will be less contrasty and grayer. But if you heat up the chemicals to 24 degrees or something like that, you're going to get extra contrast. So again, you've already got contrast with your contrast filters, but you can gain or lose contrast with the temperature of your chemicals. And yeah, so I found that out the hard way sometimes. Like I've left my oil heater too close and it was like 24 degrees, and I was using a low grade filter but still getting like really contrasty stuff. So that's good to be aware of too, that really heating up your chemicals will make it react faster and create a more contrasty print. Kind of the equivalent to pushing negative film or something like that. So if you really want like really like crushed blacks and blown out whites, then I guess the way to go would use a high filter and use high temperatures in your chemistry, and you know, you probably come out with some pretty nice looking stuff. Another thing is the actual, when you develop the prints in the developer, you can't like overexpose prints in the development fluid. It's not like developing a negative. The longer you leave it in there, it's just gonna kind of stay where it's at because it has like a threshold. But if you take it out earlier, that can have an effect. And I think most people wouldn't like it, but I've taken my fibre paper out at like 30 seconds or 45 seconds, just when it's come up, and then neutralised it and fixed it. And it kind of comes out with a really sort of grimy looking, dirty texture to it. I'll try and put an image up for you to show you, but again, that's good to sort of use in like a creative process if you want to go that way with it. But yeah, so that's advanced printing techniques. There are many more, but you know, I can't think of them just yet. I guess some enlargers have like bellows and stuff. See, like mine has bellows, but you can adjust these to get like again, to create correct like lines and stuff on buildings. But you know, you can research that yourself because I haven't really done it that much. Okay, so what you can see now is I'm in the shower. So you can just leave the shower going for about, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. You're supposed to rinse fibre prints for a long time, but again, I'm very impatient. Take the print out, put it on the wall. I mean, you could do it if you have like a piece of glass or something like that in your shower, big piece of glass. Put it on that. This is just a cheap like car squeegee, so you don't have to buy a photographic one or anything. And when it's ready, you squeegee the reverse side of the print, and then squeegee the surface, then squeegee the front part, and then there's gonna be hardly any water on it and it'll dry faster. So after this, we're gonna put them on the pegs to dry. Okay, so as you can see now, this is where I hang my prints after I've squeegeed them down. So I just pin them on the corner there, but make sure if you do buy something like this that you check that there's no like pattern or detail on the peg, because if you put that on your wet paper, you're gonna get it's gonna leave like an imprint of the pattern. So you can hang them from the corner and wait for them to dry. Resin paper dries maybe within an hour if you're lucky, but FB fibre paper takes a few hours, and it's not worth chancing it. You're best to leave it a good 6-8 hours, something like that. So what I do is I take the print, which is already dry but it's curled up, and I'll put that in a book or a magazine, and then I'll put the laptop on top of that magazine. And laptops tend to like emit quite a lot of heat, So if you leave your laptop on there and just do what you got to do for about 4 hours, the prints come out quite straight, or straight enough to be happy with, I feel. This print doesn't seem to be ready yet, but it's more or less there, and you can see what a difference it makes. Okay, so I hope this video helped you out, and again, if you want to ask any questions or you want to add anything, feel free to make comments. Thank you.